Media Services Associate. This is going to be a creative guide to recording, mixing, and using ambient sound. Just to introduce myself a little bit, I do have a background in sound. I studied music composition and got a master's degree from the University of Hartford in music composition. So I graduated in 2021, and I've scored stuff for multimedia work and like theater productions and classical live concert venues, but also I really enjoy creating like experimental electronic music and using just like random ambient sound design to create music out of that. And I'm gonna show you one of my pieces in a minute. I also really like to use a mix of visual and audio mediums. So this job's really exciting for me because I just kind of recently got very into video and like using like creative cinematography that way, but I am an animator as well, so a lot of my projects are audio visual with like kind of lo-fi looping animations. So I'm the Media Services Associate, and if you want to like check out stuff that I've done, you can follow me on YouTube. That is my name on YouTube right there. I'm gonna play this piece. It's called Falling Down the Music Hole, and I wrote it, it's the first piece that I made in the pandemic, and it was a way for the composers ensemble that I was in grad school to still collaborate when we all kind of got sent home for quarantine. Everyone sent me recordings from like around their house, and like I took a bunch and I like arranged them and used a lot of effects to make a piece out of them. So here it is.
Let yourself. Be silently drawn by the stronger pull. Leather spine of black leather. No more advice. Death will open your eyes to what her face is. Leather spine of black leather. No more advice. yourself be silently drawn by the stronger pull of what you really love.
So thank you very much. I created that by, just taking a lot of different recordings from a bunch of different places, and because they were recorded on like a bunch of different audio recorders and just like locations with different levels and everything, it was important to go through and like really balance them precisely, and that was quite hard, and use EQ and use compression to try to make them on like a level playing field. But then from there I used a lot of like really long delay and reverb and distortion, as well as like pitch shifting things, so that you can like take sound and just make it, put it in a completely different register and just transform it entirely. So I like to do that a lot in my work. So now I'm going to give you an overview of what we'll cover today. We're going to start by talking about the sound design workflow from start to finish, like just having an idea, knowing like what you want to record, and then having a final product. The field recorder is the Tascam DR40X, so we're going to go over how to use a field recorder. We're going to go over recording basics. I'll let you try it for yourself, and then we're hopefully going to be able to process the recorded audio in a digital audio workstation. And if for some reason it doesn't work today, like I'll get you information on that later, because I think that's a really important part of this. And then how to mix and what effects to use to get some like really nice sounding audio for your projects. And then if there's time, I can show you some more of my music. So just to start with the workflow, these are the steps to capturing really quality audio and transforming them into something that's going to sound professional in the background of your film projects. Does anyone have questions before we get started on this? Okay, cool. So before you even start going out and just pointing your recorder at things, it's really important to brainstorm what type of sound you want to capture, because there are a lot of different types of sound, and it depends on what you're trying to achieve, depends on the equipment that you bring to the setup. So knowing that ahead of time is really important. You could be trying to get sound that is very wide and spacious, something that's close up and crisp and is like essentially like in your face and kind of tactile. You could be going for like a voiceover sound, something that's outside, something that is really quiet, like kind of an ASMR kind of experience for your listener, or just general like organic ambient sound. So there is just so many different types of sound that you can capture with different equipment. So next you're going to think about what equipment will be best to capture the sound that you're going for. We obviously have the field recorder, and that can capture in a couple of different ways depending on how you have the stereo condenser microphones configured that are internal, or if you plug something into it. The different microphones, there's dynamic, there's condenser, there's shotgun microphones, there's pressure zone microphones, so you can put something on a table and pick up vibrations. Once you get deeper into knowing how to do sound design, you're going to have all of these options in front of you. But there is already a lot that you can do just with a field recorder. So let's say that you bring a field recorder onto the job with you. What accessories will you need to capture sounds from outside? You're probably going to want to bring a tripod so that you can have a really stable and smooth sound experience, where you're not just like moving all over the place, and you can eliminate having footsteps, that kind of thing. If you have a tripod in a stationary place. You're gonna want to have an SD card, backup batteries. You're gonna want a wind guard just in case it's windy. Headphones to listen to your sound while you're recording them. And yeah, that just about covers just a normal field recorder experience. So then you go out and gather sounds. If you're, eventually you can get experienced enough where you can just look at the levels on the screen and not really need to be listening with headphones to know like what it's going to sound like dynamic wise, but it's really easy to take a bunch of recordings and then listen back and notice that they're distorted because it was way too loud. So when you're gathering sounds, it's good to have headphones, and it's also good to take more than you need so that you have options later when you're going through and trying to find the best part of your capture to use in your film. So from there, you take the SD card out of your field recorder. You're going to offload it onto the computer, listen to the files, and name them and organize them, because if you take as many as you should be, there's probably going to be like 20 of the same folder, and it's just going to be a lot easier to do that immediately. Then make sure you're linking the files to the software project and not to the cloud or the memory card, because sometimes if you have them if you don't have them on a local drive, they can go into your project and then disappear because your digital audio workstation can't find the file on your computer, and then that'll just kind of destroy all of the work you did, because it's going to get rid of the effects and it's going to get rid of any like splicing that you did to the sound. So making sure that they're linked to the software project and not the cloud or the memory card is an important stage. Balancing the levels is what you do when you're mixing, and then adding light effects, panning so you can spatialize the listener's experience, and once you get more experience with this, you can work on mastering as well and just making the dynamic level sound really professional in a lot of different settings. All right, any questions about the workflow?
I can't see the bottom one.
Oh,
That's the balance level.
this one here? Yeah, balance levels, add effects, pan, mix, master in the digital audio workstation. And that's what DAW means, digital audio workstation. So those are GarageBand, Logic, Ableton, anything that you download as a software to record and mix sound in. All right, cool. So we're gonna go over how to use the Tascam DR40X now. So I do think that there's enough for most people to be using one, like I said. Everyone's got an SD card. You can also plug it into this thing next to it, plug a USB and then a USB into your computer and use it as an audio interface. So you can use it for just like recording studio microphones and instruments as well, which is really cool. So it has a lot of purposes. So first we're gonna go over recording basics, and then I'm gonna go over the buttons and everything about this specific device. To turn it on, hold down the square stop button where it says home. Basic, like quick start recording. What you're gonna wanna do is press the record button one time. That arms the recording. You have to do this in any setting. You have to arm the recording in a DAW, in a, like on a mixing board, anything. So that just allows the signal to begin getting picked up. So in this stage, that's when you can check your levels, because it's not recording yet. So everybody press the record button once. You're gonna see it start flashing red, and the levels will begin to engage. If you like snap in front of the Tascam you'll start to see like peaks and stuff in the levels there. So that's, you've earned your recording. This is where you can check your levels. Press that button again and you'll start to see the time elapse, which means that you've officially started the recording. Press record or play to pause this. If you press one of those again, you're gonna keep recording on the same track, so you've just paused that track and then started again. If you press stop, it's going to stop that recording and then move on to the next track. So when you start to record again, it's going to be on a new file. So if you're out and taking just a bunch of sounds out in the open and you're like happy with this one like ambient take that you've gotten and you're like, all right, like that's one, I'm done with this. What you wanna do is you wanna stop that and then move on to the next one before you start to record another one so that you can keep those sounds separated. And then, so the time's gonna go back to 0, and that's how you know that it's moved on to the next one. To view files in this device, you can press menu, which is in the left diagonal corner. Press menu and navigate by pressing the up and the plus and minus buttons to browse. So navigate to browse. From there, you'll see the files that you created, that you've been recording. And if you want to organize or delete or just listen back to them, that's how you can do that. So when you're out and about and you want to just make sure that like you're getting your levels correct and everything's like sounding all right, you can go back through the menu, go to browse, and then you'll get the folder that you're recording into, and you can listen back through there. So that's really important because you don't want to go out and record a bunch and then just find out that you actually like were not recording, or for some reason it's really quiet. That stuff can be really frustrating. All right, so here are all the buttons. On the side, we have the aux plug-in. It's called line in, line out. You can take your headphones and plug the mini jack into the line plug there, and then you'll automatically be able to start listening to them. It's going to capture the sound without that, but you know, like I said, it's much better to have the ability to listen. They only take the mini jack headphones, so if you have ones with a TRS cable at the end, that's going to be too big, so you need to have small headphones. The switches next to line on the right, it says EXT in. That means external in. This is for recording using plugged in microphones, which I'm going to show you how to do. The microphone inputs are at the bottom side of the Tascam. There's 2 left and right inputs. You can plug in microphone cables, which are called XLR cables, or you can plug in instrument cables, which are called TRS cables. They go on, there's a little hole that you can see, and those can plug into the inside as well. So you can record direct in guitar if you wanted to. And the device is capable of acting almost as an amplifier, so you don't even need an amplifier. It'll just, you know, you can just record electric guitar directly into this device. And there are actually preamp effects inside, so you can like even get a pretty cool sound if anyone's interested in that. So on these switches, like I was saying, next to the line input, you can move it from left, center, and right. The leftmost switch is called line, and that's if you are to be recording an instrument in. The one in the middle is mic, which is for dynamic microphones. Dynamic microphones are the ones that you tend to see singers using, with the like bulbous grill on the top. singers, or like if you were to do a presentation, you'd use those kind of microphones. The one all the way to the right is for mic plus phantom. Phantom power is needed for condenser microphones. Those are studio microphones. They record at a much tighter cardioid field, so they pick up sound crisper, but they pick up a smaller range, and that's why they need phantom power. So if you have it switched all the way, I'm gonna send all of these slides out, so don't worry like about taking. Yeah, if you definitely feel free to take notes, but I'll send all of these. Yeah. Yeah. So phantom power automatic if you have it on mic plus phantom. And the microphones that I have here today are Audio-Technica shotgun microphones. So those are the kind that you would typically plug into a camera, which also has an opportunity, like a button for plus 48 volt phantom power. These are condenser microphones, and they need phantom power. This is what they look like without the pop filter. And it's really easy to just switch it on to phantom power in this. In a lot of other devices, you have to like go into the settings and turn it on, but all you gotta do is have it over here. So when you're doing voiceover with these, just look up what kind of microphone you have and see, like, is it a condenser microphone? If so, it needs phantom power. The microphone in the studio, in the audio editing studio, that's a condenser microphone as well. So the switch next to that is hold. If you have that on, the buttons are not going to be functional, because if you're out recording something and you have all your levels set properly, it's going to allow you to not like ruin anything by bumping it. But you know, if the device doesn't work, check to see if the hold button's on. Under that is the input levels. So obviously this is an important part. Think about it this way. So you have obviously volume that you can turn up and down. Volume is output. You're hearing volume, and that's not really changing the actual gain of the sound. It's just changing like how much you're hearing it. For the input level, it's different because you're changing how much, you're changing the decibels that the microphone is recording at. So when you're changing the input level, if you turn it up a lot, that's going to essentially like bump up the gain. So does everyone know what ISO is on a camera? Kind of, yeah. It's so like ISO is like a kind of like artificial light that you can add inside of a camera. That's similar to adding gain to sound, so that's going to make it distorted and noisy if you have it really loud. When you're trying to pick up a really quiet sound, it's okay to like bump up the gain a little bit, but it can really make it sound artificial if you have it too loud, and that's where the peaking comes from a lot of the time. So make sure to keep that in mind when you're turning your input level up and down. It's the microphone recording level, it's not the volume. So does that make sense? It's a little bit confusing of a concept. Does anyone have questions about that? Yes?
Does it affect the range at all?
The range
The range of audio that it's recording? Or
not really so much.
Yeah.
It's gonna pick up the same range. I mean, if there's sounds that are further away, like it'll help like pick them up better, because it's just going to be generally like bumping up those sounds on the input, but it's not going to increase the range. Yeah. So, but a better way of doing that is to just get closer to that sound. If you just bump up the range a lot, it's going to make everything else also just significantly noisier. You're just going to get a lot of distortion and like really low rumbly noise that you're going to have to cut out after the fact. Then if you turn it upside down, there is the bottom screw, so you can put this onto a camera or onto the foot of a tripod using the screw on the bottom side. Okay, on the front screen, the button that says 1/2 solo is If you're on 4-channel for whatever reason, that's going to allow you to solo the top microphones. The 3-4 is going to allow you to solo the bottom microphones. Yes.
What does it mean to solo?
It just, so, if you go into record mode, it's going to allow you to either record stereo, mono, dual, and 4-channel. You can, and then there's another selection below that says where do you want your input from. So your input can be from your built-in internal microphones or your plugged-in external microphones. 4-channel means that you are using stereo from the top 2 microphones and also the two plugins, so stereo from the external microphones. So that's 4 channels. So you're using all 4 channels of the device. If you wanted to just hear what's being picked up by the top ones, that's what solo means. It's going to allow you to solo just the internal microphones or solo the external microphones. So that it's just cutting off, it's muting the other 2 so that you can hear what's happening at the other 2. So that's just to let you know that it has the capability of doing that. You can record ambient sound as well as recording dialogue or interviewing someone. You can get kind of a whole range of the room noise and also a close-up. Yes.
So if we, for example, have this, when someone also has a mic attached somewhere recording
Yes.
ambient noise, that would if we weren't soloing, that would record both at the same time.
Yeah, if you were not soloing, yeah, that would record all of that. Mm-hmm. So to solo would mean okay, I don't want to record with my externals for a bit. So settings, recording settings. The format that you want to use, standard, is WAV 16-bit, and then the sample rate that you want to be using is 44.1. If you record in 48, which is the other option, you're going to sound like a chipmunk. There's some reasons to use that, but definitely just don't. Then if you go into the menu and you want to play around with other effects in there, there's a lot of cool stuff you can do. And then also, you have the ability to switch between X, Y. So like I said, it's a field recorder because it's picking up a field of sound as opposed to microphones, which just pick up a directional pattern. So there's all sorts of directional patterns, but they're really small. These are huge. These can pick up all the way across the room. Very wide stereo condenser microphone pattern. So this is XY, so it's picking up everything that's inside, it's not picking up stuff over here. But if you make them AB, now it's picking up everything that's kind of in front of me. Because it is picking up slightly to the side of this. So if you're trying to record if you're trying to just record a sound, say you're outside and you hear a cricket and you're I want to get this cricket, you're probably going to want to use XY and try to position yourself in the sound. If you're trying to pick up a wide ambient range of the outdoors, I would probably use AB because that's going to be a much broader field that you're going to be able to capture there. So those are 2 ways to change it up with this device. Now it's time to go try it for yourself. So you can go outside, you can stay inside, but just put headphones on and you can go in pairs or there should be 6 working ones at least. So go in pairs and take 10 minutes because I really do want to get to mixing. So if you can be back by 11.
Now we're on to the mixing of the sound recordings portion of this lesson. So I have here a nice long audio recording that I took just walking around a park. So it's about as ambient as noise can get, and I was using a wind guard on the Tascam. So There is plenty to choose from here. When I loaded it into the digital audio workstation, currently I'm using Logic, I turned the gain on the track down to about 6.6. This way I know it will not be peaking when I play it, as I add dynamic effects that will increase the presence and overall volume of the track in the end. So if you start quiet, then it gives you room to increase the dynamic volume of the track, and then you can always turn it up in the main track later on. But this is a good way of knowing that you have room to work with. So here's how it sounds, completely unedited. So that's me crumpling some leaves and pine cones. I'm going to cut the track right here, and we're just going to work with this track. So I'm going to get rid of the rest, as there's more action in this portion. So I'm just going to take it and drag it back to the beginning, and we can work on just this little bit of audio here. So first, you can see the tracks peaks and sound file in the track finder down here. There's a couple of options in Logic to look at it, but this is a really good just view of the dynamic contents of the original unedited track. So now you can go over and it's similar in GarageBand, the way that you add the track, or the way that you add effects to the audio lane. On Logic it's over to the side, but on GarageBand it's down below this track finder here. So, but it's the same way of adding things to the audio lane. And now what we can do is add an EQ. So it's an equalizer, and it's going to show you if you turn on the analyzer in if you turn on the analyzer and set it to pre, yeah, it shows you the frequency range of your sound. So a lot of the sound here is coming from below 60, which is really muddy. And you only hear, you're hearing a rumbling. And then we saw some peaks up in the 4K to 6K range, so I'm going to raise that a little bit. But you don't want to raise that too much, because you can get a really synthetic sound out of that. If you raise the frequency band too much, it's just going to essentially add too much gain, and it's going to sound really fake. So now it's cutting out those extremely low frequencies that are going to just get in the way of your main sound. So now next we can add a compressor. Let's listen to the factory default. What a compressor does is takes the highest and the lowest dynamics of your sound and squeezes it into a normalized range. So it's going to essentially limit the decibels that your sound can go over, and then raise the lowest ones up to meet the highest ones. You're going to hear everything in a more concentrated decibel range. And if you don't feel like that, just having on the compressor itself is enough, and you want currently everything is situated around negative 12 dB. If you want it to be even a higher starting point, you can put on 0 dB. Now everything's quite louder. Turn on the limiter if your sound is getting in the red. And change your analyzer to post to see what the sound looks like after you've started messing around with the effects, because now it's, yeah. So these are footsteps with EQ and compressor on. This is them without it. You can barely hear it. Now for more specialized audio, you can add a slight reverb. Dry and wet output controls relates to the amount of original unedited audio that's being fed to the output. So 100% dry means that you're hearing all of the original sound that isn't going through reverb, and wet means that you're hearing all of the sound that is going through reverb. So here is how it sounds with 100% dry and 100% wet. It's going to be unaffected by the reverb modulation. So essentially, you can turn it on and off and there's no difference. So with 100% wet and 0% dry, it's going to be 100% affected by the reverb on the output. So now it's a much spacier and far away sound. So this will affect the way that your audience is hearing the sound reverberate from within the digital audio workstation. So if you think about it, reverberations occur in every single room that you're in. If you want to put your sound in a specific space, if you want to make it sound like it's coming from inside of a giant room, you're going to add more reverb as opposed to like footsteps like outside, where there is not as many walls to reverberate off of. So since we're outside right now, we're going to make the dry output 90%, so it's almost all the way the same with 20% reverb. So it's slight, but you do hear some reverberation. You can then change the size of the room here, and the reflectivity, so how many times the sound is going to bounce off of the artificial walls that you're putting up. And then you can also play with the filters once you have more understanding of that. But keeping the special effects here light is a good way of making your sound more realistic. So now we're going to play with the panning and the fade in and fade out of certain sounds. So let's start with the footsteps here. Go into the special tools and grab a fade tool. Then what you can do is easily just fade in the sound. So now it's going to sound like someone is approaching you because they're starting quiet and getting louder. So if you want to make it sound like they're moving from one side of the room to the other, you can pan from left to right. So the pan is this dial over here. And then we can do the same with a fade out effect. Since we still have the fade tool on, all I gotta do is drag and we're gonna fade away. And then to automate, arm the recording and change the settings of the automation in your audio lane over here from read to latch, and it'll save any changes that you do to the effects while the recording is taking place. So now you can see that the panning is going to start from the left, and you can click on the automation arm and move over to pan down here and see that it moved from the left side all the way to the right side, exactly how I set it to do while I was recording, while I had the recording armed. And you can see it move on its own because so that's a great way to spatialize your sound for the video. If you think about how you want the listener to experience the spatial awareness of your audio in relation to what's happening on screen, you can just use these very simple effects of reverb, fading in and fading out, and panning to give your listener a fully dimensional experience with sound. It does not have to be overly complicated. So the principles we went over today are EQing and looking at the an analyzer to accentuate and subtract unwanted frequencies from your sound to make it clear, less muddy, and overall a more professional sounding sound. Then we went over how to use the compression to create a dynamic range that accentuates, once again, the high and low frequencies in a similar normalized volume range, as opposed to having a very wide range of high and low sounds where the really loud ones are overpowering the quiet ones. Then we added some light reverb by setting the dry output very high and the wet output relatively low in a small reflexive room, so that there is some reverberated modulation, but not an overpowering amount for the space that we've created. We then learned how to automate a track using panning from left to right to make it sound like the person is walking from one side of the room to the other. And then we found the fader tool and faded the track in and out. So those are, like I said, some ways to create a dynamic spatial awareness for the sounds in your media projects. I hope all of this helped, and I hope if you have any questions, you reach out to me or come visit me in the media services department, and we can go over how to add these techniques to your own project.
Leather spine of black leather. Nomura device. Death will open your eyes to what her face is. Leather spine